My name is Topper Steinman, and I am the least common denominator in this arena tonight. This program, Dyslexia, Perspectives from some Experts. That would refer to these people. You got me? You get that, don't you? Okay, all right, good. Because I'm just kind of going to schlep along here. This is sponsored by LEAP, which is Linking Educators and Parents, a steering committee, a group of people that have met over the years to talk about kids and adults who learn differently and how can we best help that bridge get stronger and be built so it lasts and it's healthy and it's whole. People on the committee, Leslie Sullivan, who you'll meet in a minute, is with us in LEAP. Cynthia Johnson, who's in speech and hearing, professor at the University of Illinois, is on the committee. Sarah Castle, who's our parent, although some of us are parents also, but is on our committee. And our esteemed Marilyn Kay. Applaud that, will you please? And the downside is Marilyn can't join us tonight due to another conflict, which for any of those of you who have been in this community, in this area, in this state, and have tried to find out anything you can about children who learn differently, Marilyn Kay is a hallmark in the field. So we appreciate that Marilyn's here. Used to be director of the reading group, which is now directed by Jennifer Bell, who will raise her hand and identify herself. She's right here. Jennifer's done an incredible job of taking over and filling some awfully big shoes with Marilyn Kay's, in my opinion at least. So we're glad you're here. There are CPDUs. Let's get a little handle on the audience. I mostly have my parent hat on tonight. If that's you, raise your hand. You're a parent? Thanks. I'm an educator. You might be an educator and a parent. I'm a student. U of I, high school, otherwise. I am a community member who's very interested in this topic. I just come to programs because I'm addicted to programs. I have no idea what this is about. Who did I miss? What topic did I miss?
Grandparents.
Thank you, grandparents. Awesome, grandparents. That would suffice for me too. So, well, I'm not going to take any more time. I want you to meet these people. So we're going to do 4 things, and then it's yours and theirs. Thing 1 is they're going to tell you who they are, what they do, personally, professionally. Thing 2 is they're going to talk a little bit about their own issues, personally and professionally, with this issue of dyslexia. Thing 3 is who helped you and how. And thing 4 is what hints do you have for parents, educators, grandparents, those of us who are in this milieu, who are trying to make sense out of some complications at times. And John, I might mention, suggested that it's pretty incredible that on an evening around dyslexia, we could all show up. That was John, that wasn't me, believe me. And John would suggest it was his, I won't even go there. I won't even go there. So meet these people going down this way, and then we'll get on with it, and then we open it up to any questions and comments you have in a bit.
My name is Tina Miller. I was diagnosed with dyslexia the summer between my first and first grade. I currently work for the University of Illinois in accounts payable. I am the analytics and operations coordinator. I'm also the database analysis and database builder. That's my professional hat. My personal hat, I am a lifelong diagnosed dyslexic who wants to educate people about dyslexia. And I've also just been, well, not just been, but I've been a member of the reading group board for about 6 months, 8 months. And I was also a student of Marilyn Kay's about 30 years ago. So.
When you were 1 year old?
Yeah.
You notice how good I am? You see that? Okay. Tina, thanks. We appreciate that you're here. Thank you very much. John.
My name's John Dixon. I'm the photo editor at the News Gazette. I'm a lifelong member of the Champaign-Urbana community. I've never been diagnosed with dyslexia, but I've been told that I have it, and I seem to exhibit most of the symptoms of it. I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I guess I'm a visual learner.
Thanks, John. Any of you that view pictures in the News Gazette, you're likely to see it.
Right.
So John is rich and famous.
Yeah.
1 out of 2 ain't bad. That's-
And I'm not rich or famous, unfortunately. However, hello, my name is Leslie Sullivan, and I'm an educator here in Champaign, actually, Unit 4. I was a classroom teacher and then went on to get my master's degree in special education and have been working in the field of special education ever since, probably for the past 15, 16 years. I too am dyslexic, undiagnosed, but really I've diagnosed myself. My area of, and I never use the term expertise, the area that I feel most comfortable with and what I've done most of my research on is in the field of dyslexia. In doing so, I learned a lot about myself and my family members, and just recently had, my niece was just diagnosed with dyslexia as well. So that's my background.
And personally,
Oh, personally, I'm a teacher.
you got kids?
Oh,
and,
absolutely,
whole
yes. I have
ages.
2 boys, a 22-year-old that just graduated from college and has a job, yay. And a very good one. And then I have an 18-year-old son that's in college and playing baseball as we speak. And a husband that I never see.
Thank you. Who's the legislator
He is, yes.
in the state of Illinois?
yes.
If you want anything done in the state, write it.
Oh, please.
Well, no, don't write it, I guess. I don't know, maybe. Alan?
My name's Alan Byler. I was a building contractor for 40 years in Champaign-Urbana. I didn't know that I had dyslexia until I was in my second time around in college at the University of Illinois, and an article came out in the paper in 1956 describing the malady from which I suffered all these years. What I just thought I wasn't bright prior to that until somebody described exactly the symptoms of dyslexia. And I am now 86 years old, and I'm still dyslexic. It's not like a common cold. You don't get over it. You have it the rest of your life. I have 4 children. 3 of my children have symptoms lesser than mine. I never met another dyslexic that was exactly like I am, because I display it as a function of my personality and my life experience, which means it shows up differently in me than it does anybody else that I've run across. My gifts have been 3-dimensional all my life: art, the ability to make things, construct things, and see things in 3 dimension in my head.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you. I've asked them to tell a little bit more about their story. So I don't care who starts this, but the dyslexic story of when you began to notice and how you began to notice and what sorts of, and any one of these people could take the next hour to do that, and we wouldn't do it service. I'm guessing everybody's here for the reason that this issue touches us in some way, shape, or form. Raise your hand. And some of us might sit in that seat like I did some years ago and go, whoa, I think that's me. So tune in and see what happens. I don't know who wants to start and embellish a little bit more about your story and what you noticed about school and home and a little bit of that. Who'd like to start that off?
So you're the professional.
Oh, thank you. First off, let me just say thank you all for being here, because I know, on a weeknight to come out this late in the evening, I know that this topic is probably near and dear to all of you. And we all have our story. No one story is more important or less important than the other. My story kind of came about in a very odd way, to be quite honest. Teaching is my second career. I didn't start out as a teacher. I actually was an officer in the United States Air Force. And prior to that, I was a student. And I, in school, was never considered not a bright student per se, but I always knew that my learning came at a price. it was harder for me to do a lot of things that I knew my peers, it wasn't as hard for them. And I struggled with that because, you know, it's self-esteem. You think, God, what's wrong with me? I know I'm not stupid, but yet I have to study twice as hard or 3 times as long. I would be in a foreign language class because I lived in Germany and it was a requirement back then. And I would study and study and study, and still, despite the fact that I was living in Germany and I was exposed to the language, I just couldn't get it, no matter what I did. And my professor at the time was none too nice. And of course, you know, everybody has their vantage point. So when you're teaching a language, you think everybody should be able to pick up a language very easily. For me, it was excruciatingly hard. My professor, you know, would say things, not professor, my teacher, this was in high school, would always say, you're not trying enough, you know, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, which I'm sure a lot of you have either heard from your children or you've experienced yourself. And you know, it was really very hard for me because I knew I was trying, and it kind of ebbs away at your self-esteem somewhat. So it kind of really started even before that, but the bottom line for me is I never really knew why I just didn't pick things up as easily as a lot of my peer group did. And the person that really got me through it, and I'm going to be honest about this, was my mother, who, come to find out, we know now, has dyslexia. And my mother would always say to me, everybody has their gifts, Leslie, and there's certain things that you excel at. And she was, my parents in general, but my mother in particularly, you know, made it her mission to find things that I was good at. And I ended up becoming, I was a gymnast, hence the 5'1" of me, you know, and I did excel at that. So I did have something that I felt I was really good at that maybe other people weren't as good at. So that kind of helped my self-esteem. So in a nutshell, I guess that's my story. I mean, I don't want it to sound like poor pitiful me. I mean, I'm sitting here with, you know, advanced degrees, and it didn't hold me back, but it certainly, it was more of a struggle and a challenge. And so I'm here to say that it can be done, and I also know that there are many of you out there that have children that probably have very moderate to severe dyslexia, because it is in levels of severity, and they may not just be struggling with a foreign language or music or whatnot. They may be struggling possibly across every venue, and we can talk more about that later. I can talk about some things that could help perhaps as well, but that's basically my story in a nutshell.
And 3 things. Leslie's brought some handouts that she'll talk about toward the end of this that you're welcome to, and you can get access to those. And then a couple of nuggets. As we listen, I think you'll hear this word heredity and the role it plays and the hand-me-down kind of things, from the speed that we have to the dyslexia that we have to the color of our eyes and all. And then the other issue is a mother who helped her focus on some strengths and find some strengths. And I think we need to hear some of those things loudly. John, can you go next?
Sure. You know, I didn't find out I had dyslexia until I was probably an adult with children. My wife is a voracious reader, and my kids would see her reading every night, and I didn't want them to see me not reading. I wanted to be a good example. And but I couldn't read. I made it through school by kind of being the class clown. I find it kind of ironic, first of all, that I'm in a library tonight because books are my enemy. But I've never really talked to many other dyslexics. Already tonight, just in casual conversation, I've found out that I have a lot in common with these folks here at the table, and I'm sure with other people out in the audience. You know, school was always a difficult thing for me. I'm not a book learner, obviously. And I don't think I knew that there was anything wrong with me, but I did finally start to dawn on me that I guess I must be stupid. And finally, I did go to college, and I find it amazing that people can get through college with dyslexia, because I sure couldn't. As a freshman in college at Ohio State University, there's one class called Botany Zoology 110. And it's supposed to be the toughest class for the freshmen to take, and I took it in the second semester. and I decided, I'm going to find out if I'm really stupid, because I really wasn't doing very well in the other classes. So I committed myself to trying to do all the reading, because people had always told me that the answers were in the book. And I couldn't believe it because I couldn't get through the book. And so I made myself do the reading very painfully through that semester, and I got a B+ in the class, and I thought, boy, I must not be stupid. Then I put the books down, because it's still, even casual reading for me is a difficult thing to do. Like I said before, I think I'm a visual learner. If you show me how to do something, I can figure out a way to do it. Thank God for Google. I can't read an instruction manual of any kind with any competency, and I have to do a lot of work with software and different software programs and computers. And if I couldn't Google this software and this problem, and somebody else has already done it on YouTube and they'll show me, I would be lost without it.
Thanks, John. Tina, you've already identified yourself as one of the only ones who early on was diagnosed.
Yes.
So that's in and of itself kind of interesting, because this wasn't yesterday, some years ago. I'm not, did I say that again?
Some years ago.
But yeah. So anyway, your story.
Well, I was blessed by having a mother who was an educator. So she saw me in preschool, not being able to write very well, first grade, still not being able to write very well. In fact, I wrote most of my letters backwards. I wrote from left to right, but almost every single letter was backwards, because in my mind, it looked fine to me. The teacher I had wanted just to push me off. She's lazy, she'll get over it. I was acting out because when you're in first grade, you don't know how to verbalize your frustration. You only know how to outwardly react to your frustration. So if I was kind of being annoying in class, or I'd fall asleep in class because it just got to the point I couldn't follow along. So I just fall asleep. So finally my mom said, no, there's something wrong here. I see how hard she's working. So she actually got me over to the U of I and got me, Carl, and got me tested. And they said, yes, she has dyslexia. What are you going to do about it? So I repeated first grade. And when you're in the same school, same little school, Dr. Howard, if you repeat a grade, everybody knows about it. And you become the butt of every single joke for the entire next year, and the year after, and the year after, until the class you started with is finally gone. It didn't get better. In fact, it got worse. Recently I was going through I call it my dyslexic book, and it's all the standard aptitude tests that all the kids take. And my mom kept a lot of stuff from me because she knew if I heard any of this, I would have been devastated. In 5th grade, in reading, I was the 2nd percentile. That means 2% of all the national average was below me. That means 98% of the kids were above me. And if you tell that to a kid, the kid's just going to give up. But my mom didn't say that. She said, you did so good at math. I did above average in math. I did above average in science. I did above average in anything that I can get my hands on. I did above average in. It was the reading, it was the spelling, it was the trying to get words to come off the page that would make any sense. When I would read word, word, word with no context. It would just be words. I couldn't put it together in a story. I couldn't put it together in a stream of thought. So back to my mom, she had a brother who, when he was young, lost his sight. So when growing up, she would remember sitting around listening to books on tape. So it's called RFB, Reading for the Blind. So she got me involved in that. So I started listening to books, audiobooks, and I fell in love. It just, words weren't popping off the page, they were entering into my ears, and I would realize, I would actually understand what was going on. I would have full understanding. So once we started to establish that I was an audio learner, we started getting books, my textbooks on tape. We would start doing things like untimed tests. So I wasn't limited by the 35 minutes you have in class to do an essay. I can go in and I can do the test, I can do the essay with however long I needed to take to get those words out of my head onto paper. It got better, and slowly, surely, I started, I think it was in 4th, 5th grade, I started working with Marilyn Kay at the reading group, and they taught me other ways, not how to learn how to read, but to learn how to learn, because that was my issue. I could learn, but I wasn't learning how they were teaching me, how the regular mainstream teachers. So as I was growing into whatever I am now, learning that the three-dimensional aspect, the being able to see things and take it apart and then put it back together, I started making jewelry. I started making, well, scarves. I started painting like pots and like paint your own pottery. And I started music. I was really good at music because unlike words on a page, when you put music on lines, the lines don't move. The notes don't move. So that was a constant. So I learned music. So it was being able to relate what I could do versus what I had a hard time doing and try to find a way to meld that together into one stream. So in the 5th grade, I had the 2 percentile. By the 8th grade, for reading, I was in the 33rd percentile. So between 6th and 8th grade, I had a huge jump because my mom was working with me. I was working with the reading group. I was also getting special ed help at school. In 5th grade, Dr. Howard, my 5th grade teacher says, okay, what are your goals? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to get out of special ed. I want to go back into regular classrooms. I was advanced math. I was really good in sciences. I was really good in history because I love stories. I can see the relationships between different figures and be able to understand what was going on. But I had to sit in a class, and in middle of class, I had to stand up and walk out the door and go down to the basement for my special ed hour. So all the students were like, well, why does she get to leave? You know, what's so special about her? And then so I had to tell my entire class, well, I'm dyslexic. Well, what does that mean? Are you contagious? And I was in 5th grade. So having that type of experience of knowing that I'm not going to be as good as these kids in certain aspects, but I can kick their butt in other areas. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't, because I couldn't still vocalize it. I couldn't speak the words because the words aren't there in my head. So we were talking, I think last time I was at a LEAP meeting, there was a video and they said, well, dyslexics have a hard time remembering names. Dyslexics have a hard time remembering dates. They have a hard time thinking of the words that they want to say. So it's like a Rolodex, where you're going through your Rolodex trying to find that one piece of paper with that one word on it, and you know what the word means. You just don't have it in your vocabulary at that moment. So processing through that, being able to get my audiobooks through college, or my textbooks on audiobooks through college. I still to this day love audiobooks. I do 3 or 4 books a week on average, and I do history and fantasy and fiction and nonfiction just because I love the written word. The written word doesn't love me. I've been through ISU. I even took a couple classes at Penn State. I've been to Parkland. I've been to Illinois State, and I really want to get my MBA at U of I. What's stopping me? Time. That's the only thing stopping me. Dyslexia doesn't hinder. It may cause me to work 2 or 3 times harder than the rest of my classmates, but it's never been a roadblock. Only if you make it. So.
You remember those awful standardized tests we used to have to take?
I got it right here.
Well, how did you fill them out?
A, B,
Well,
C.
you'd see the other kids turning the page, and it's a timed test, and finally you just start
Yeah.
making a pattern down the page so you can turn the page. I'll get a couple of
That
them
looks
right.
like a giraffe. I can make an elephant on the second page.
I always went to the math first, just
Yeah.
because I knew the concepts. I can see the concepts in my head.
Can anybody identify those standardized tests? Difficulty? Yes, maybe, sort of, kind of? It's interesting. Well, as did Leslie and as does John and as does Tina, mentioned some things. The whole notion of accommodation, which Leslie will talk about later, and the resources, using resources and building that foundation that gets some strength to it, which you were able to do early with help from your mother, hear that kind of stuff. I mean, that's coming out. And then just we all learn differently. And I think mythically, there's this notion that if you write backwards or you number backwards or something, that's what dyslexics do. A real small percentage of us dyslexics actually do that. So it evidences itself in all sorts of different ways than the backwards kind of thing that we all have the mythical stuff about. Let's hear from Alan, then I'm going to ask them a couple more things, then it's your turn to, and I'll frame that a little bit for us as we move along. So thanks for keeping your ears tuned in and hope it's helpful. Al, please.
I thought I was a normal kid until I got to the 1st and 2nd grade, and I discovered when I tried to learn to read and to spell that I wasn't a normal kid. I wasn't like everybody else, and it was a real difficult experience for me. I had a mother who was an English teacher and a father who was a science teacher and an administrator of a large high school in Chicago. I had a brother and sister who were exceptionally bright, and they preceded me through school. So when I came along, the teachers said, well, what's wrong with Alan? How come? And the problem was that my father, who passed me the bum gene, never understood and blamed me for being not bright like my brother and sister. And my mother, who was an English teacher, didn't know how to fix me, but she knew how to love me, and she loved me the best she could, and tried to teach me how to read and to spell. My brother ended up being dean of the School of Arts and Science in Southern, and my sister was the best lab technician going through Northwestern at the time. And I was trying to figure out how to learn how to read. I wanted to drop out of school at age 16. I was so miserable in school. And one of the things that happened was that I took typing. I had to take typing, it was required. And in typing, the number of words that you misspelled were subtracted from the number of words that you could type in a minute. And as a result, the teacher would take these orally, and where everybody was giving 15, 20, 25 words a minute, I was giving 2. And that was an experience that was so excruciating that I, to this day, will not use a keyboard on a computer because I am so upset by that whole experience of keyboard. When I did have to type, I had to pick up one from a piece of paper, one letter at a time, and move over and type it, and then go back for the next letter, because I couldn't pick up a group of letters or the whole word and type it in. So it was just not a gift that I could manage. I went to college because my mother insisted that I go to college, and she said, I'll help you if you just go. And it turned out that the only course I could take in the college I went to that didn't require a foreign language was a science major, which meant more than half of your hours, considerably more than half of your hours, had to be in science. But science was relatively easy for me. As a matter of fact, I majored in chemistry, and chemistry is a rational subject. Spelling is an irrational subject. And so, because it was a rational subject and you could always count on it being the same always, I could do chemistry without any difficulty. But my problem really wasn't that I didn't want to be a chemist and I didn't want to be in science. So after the Korean War, I came back on the GI Bill and went to the University of Illinois to learn to study architecture, which I did for a couple of years for the purpose of learning what architects know in terms of design and structure, but for the purpose of going into the building business, because I love to make things. I love to make things from the time I was a little boy. My parents gave me tools with which to work. I had a lathe when I was 14, and I made billy clubs and baseball bats and gavels and all sorts of things. So I always was good at making things with my hands, three-dimensional sort of thing. And as it turns out, to be a contractor, three-dimensional gifts are a real advantage. It's easy to see in my head what a house will look like standing up in 3 dimensions and figure the amount of material it'll take to build it, because I can see what it takes. And so that was my experience growing up. And I struggled along learning how to live with my disability. And it turns out that if you go into school and you can't read and spell and do numbers, you're thought of by the system as being inadequate and less than bright. But if your English teacher can't draw something, she doesn't pay any penalty, because drawing is not valued in public school. So if I could build a house that my English teacher could live in, but I was getting D's and F's, and she thought I was stupid, she really didn't understand that there are other gifts in this world that are of value besides reading and spelling. And if you have to, you can learn to get by with people who love you and will marry you and will correct your letters. And you can get by without those gifts pretty well. And so that's pretty much how I've managed my life. I've had a lot of help in the weaknesses to be able to survive in my strengths.
You can bumper sticker some of these comments, and that might be one of them, by the way. I have 43 comments to make about Alan, and I'll make about 3 of them, and then I'll ask them if they have a comment about any, and then one more thing, and then we'll go on. Alan is the husband to Julie Byler, who runs the Corral. Does a beautiful job. If any of you have ever gone to, could I say, is that okay to?
Yeah, I think she's here.
Is Julie here? Julie is here, right there. Yes, Julie, yeah. Does an incredible job. So if any of you have an opportunity to hear the Corral perform, you've watched Julie Byler direct that Corral. So,
thank you.
yes.
Also a good proofreader.
When I was emailing about this, Julie said, I'm his social secretary. So I got the notice back from Julie. They all talk about some things that obviously stand out. The notion of focusing on strengths, the notion of finding resources to wrap yourself around, the notion of how profound pain is early on and can stay with us for such a long time, as Alan talks about, in terms of getting our nose rubbed in things that we have difficulty with. So those sorts of things, and maybe many others. Who, not so much the name, but who helped you and how? What was the pivotal moment? And this isn't the story time, so I'm asking if you could nugget this a bit. And then I'm going to ask you what didn't help you so much, and then it's yours. So what helped you the most? If you could nugget that, what would you say?
Well, in my life, I've just been blessed with the right people at the right moment who would just not give up on me. And whether it was Boy Scouts where I could learn to do things, and I'll give you the names, Milt Forsberg and Stan Rankin in Boy Scouts. They taught me how to develop film and learn how to use a camera and take pictures and turn a hobby into a profession. And then as I started to become a photographer, Kurt Beamer, who just was the greatest teacher I've ever had in my life. But I couldn't learn from a book, but he could teach me how to do things in photography. Like Alan was saying, he was good at chemistry. In photography, a lot of it was trial and error, run into a roadblock, figure out what you did wrong, go back and do it again. And if you're persistent, you can do it. And I had plenty of time to do that because I wasn't reading books. And most everybody that wasn't good at photography would get frustrated by the hurdles they ran into, and they'd go read a book. And that, I had to find something that I could be successful at. I had a wonderful counselor in high school, Mrs. Rodemaker, Helen Rodemaker. And at the moment in my life when I needed somebody to say, what are you going to be when you grow up? Hell, I was 15 years old. I had no idea what I was going to be when I was going to grow up, and frankly, I didn't want to talk about it. But she wouldn't let me leave her office until I told her, and out of the blue, I just said, I want to be a photojournalist, just to make her be quiet so I can go away, And so she went through her Rolodex, and she called Harold Holmes at the News Gazette. He was the editor of the News Gazette at that time. And she did the same thing to him. She wouldn't let him off the phone until he said, send him over. And then when I tried to be an example to my children with reading, one of my coworkers' wives, Lori Dye, she was a reading teacher in Unit 4, and she said, I think you have dyslexia. And I was like, well, what's dyslexia? And she said, well, I think it's, what you talk about where you have to read every word, and you get stuck on words, and you change the words around. You come and I'll give you a test. Oh, great, I love tests. And so she gave me a test, and it was like, yeah, you've got dyslexia. You need to go get some adult reading classes. So then I went to the reading group, and I forget my teacher's name, but he was terrific, and taught, well, I still got to read every word, but the most important thing for me was if it's a capitalized word in the middle of a sentence, it doesn't matter how you pronounce it. I had to try to figure out, how do you pronounce Flugawugawitz? He says, just, it's a person, place, or a thing. Just make up a name and go on. I couldn't go on. I always had to get every word just right. And so, I've just had the very fortunate experience of having people in the right moment, in the right place, at the right time in my life. And hopefully for everybody else, they have the same experience. I'm not sure that's true.
And out of that resource and persistence and resilience comes a awfully talented photographer. Nugget. What was the nugget for you that kind of turned it that you could share?
Well, there's three people specifically. I can't remember one of their names, but Anita Bell. She was my special ed teacher at Dr. Howard. She was the one that just kept saying, I don't believe you. I know you can do this. I know you can do this. She just kept pushing me and pushing and pushing. And she was the one to really facilitate getting me into the mainstream classroom when I got to junior high. There was a lady, and I know her name is Judy, but I cannot remember her last name. She was at University of Illinois at Springfield, where I got my bachelor's. She was in the Office of Disability Concerns, and she probably had the most profound physical disabilities I've ever known. But beautiful mind, absolutely beautiful mind. And anytime I went to her and said, it would help me if I had blah, she was not a problem. Let me look into that. So she was the one that helped me graduate. She got me my textbooks on audiobook. She got me textbooks in PDF. She said, oh, there's this new software out here. Let me get you a copy of this software. Load the software, load the PDF, and it will read it for you. So you don't have to go chapter by chapter, because the teacher was saying, okay, let's start with chapter 2, then let's go chapter 6, and let's go back to chapter 1. So she actually got me the entire book in PDF, so I can jump back and forth. Judy was absolutely amazing, and when I finally graduated, I made her, I painted this jar, and it had the UIS logo on the front, and then in, I think, 9 or 10 different languages, there was thank you. None of them was English, but they were just thank you. And my favorite was Sherpa, because she carried my load. She really did. And the day that I graduated, the last day I was on campus, she was out. I didn't get the chance to say thank you. So Anita, Judy, Marilyn was a very big influence. I worked some with her, but I worked mostly with other teachers from the reading group. But one of my biggest nags was my mom, who's actually in the back. She would not let me give up. She would not take no for an answer. She would not take I'm tired for an answer. She would just be like, well, if you want to give up, then give up, but don't expect any sympathy. So yeah, that's kind of
Thank you. You hear people, you hear believed in me, and you hear help me navigate resources. I mean, it comes out real strongly. People believed in me, navigate resources. Nugget, Alan, a nugget. And then I'm going to ask you to go one last sentence, and then it is yours. Nugget.
Oh.
What helped the most?
When I was 12 years old, somebody built a house across the street from where I lived. School was acting out for me, the teachers were acting out that I was a dumb kid and that I wasn't going anywhere. But this, across the street where the house was being built, there were about 4 real first-class carpenter guys who allowed me to come over and invited me up on the scaffold, and they acted out, you're really a neat kid. You can saw boards and you can nail, and we think that you're really an outstanding kid. And they did for me what school wasn't doing for me, and that was they made me feel like I was worth something. And I remember I was up on the roof, and a woman came by, and she said to one of the carpenters, do you see that little boy up there on that roof? And I remember yet to this day, he said, lady, when that boy falls off that roof, we'll all be on the ground. And that was a statement about my abilities, my worth. And so I was dealing with a terrible sense of inferiority, and I was looking for somebody who thought I was worthwhile. And that, along with my mother's persistent love, is what changed my life.
Thank you. Leslie, a nugget. Thank you.
And it's going to be a nugget. I think the prevailing theme is what I'm hearing here is there was someone in our life, and I had more than one person, but in a nutshell, my mother and my aunt, who was also a teacher, who worked with me as well, and who believed in me, and I had a good support system. So I think that truly was instrumental for me in just knowing that I could do whatever I set my mind to.
Thanks.
And I did.
Thanks. And I hope some of this resonates and captures. The one thing that you would caution us to not do as parents or educators, you get one sentence. So parents and educators sitting in this audience, please try not to do this. One sentence.
do not underestimate any child.
Thanks. Thought, John?
Don't give up.
Thanks.
Don't stereotype. That's what I
Thanks.
mean.
Are you hearing these? Don't stereotype. So be careful about making, well, she can't read, so therefore she's inadequate in lots of things. Yes.
Don't make your child feel worthless. Inferiority.
Thanks. Questions? And I have some boundaries for this, but what each of you could spend the next 40 minutes that we have with this group and make it be wonderful for you. So let's try to honor the fact that there's about 50 of us in the audience. Questions that you have, we'll try to give you answers where you don't feel you get the answer or you're confused about what you heard. We'll stay a little bit after, and these people will be available to you for a short period of time. We do have to clear out of here by about 8:25. So we're going to be done by 8, but you'd have some time at the end. Questions that you have or comments that you have, please.
Something very important I'd like to share with the panel, and I've taken time to observe them very quickly. We have children that are dyslexic, qualified for IEPs, but I still see struggles up there. And so even though you're gonna continue on, I still see the fact that it's gonna take you much longer. It's difficult still. And so there's a program that I ran across, and it's called the Davis Dyslexia Correction Program. And the key word is correction. And the school system does not help dyslexics. That's the cold hard fact. They qualify for IEPs, but when Ryan completed the Davis program, he qualified out of the IEP. He is now a sophomore in high school, virtually straight A's, no reading issues because the problem is now corrected. But Davis himself was completely illiterate at age 38, and he was virtually a genius because he figured out he had a problem, and then he figured out how to correct it. And when Ryan was in the IEP, it's devastating because you're pulling them out of the school, they're being made fun of. The reality is, the school system, they're teaching disabled, you're not learning disabled. And if I can't emphasize that enough, it needs to be integrated into the system. And so, that's right, everything I've heard that you guys had, nothing surprises me. Visual learner, the jewelry, the music, hands-on, three-dimensional. My husband is a general contractor, and he graduated in engineering, but yet he counts on his fingers, even though he goes through DiffyQ, but he's counting on his fingers one night. And when I have to tell him phone numbers over the phone when he calls, I can't give large sequences, but I follow Davis program, I give 2 numbers at a time, he can get it, but if I give him 586, 2954, he can't get it, but when I follow Davis's, but that is how Ryan qualified out of his IEP, and that is the solution that the school system does not help them. And
So your advice, you are mother to Ryan.
Correct.
And the Davis correction system helped Ryan and helped him make profound gains.
Right, he has.
And that may not be something that's blanket all over the place, and I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but thank you for the share.
No.
And if you'd like to find out more about the Davis correction system, you've got a minute afterwards where somebody could hit you up.
I have to go, but I'll leave my name in the back, but it's so important, I wanted to share, but the key word is correction, and you can correct it, but the key word here is everybody has their different talents, and so Ryan is the builder, Jason, our son, and also genetic, according to Davis, that you are not born with dyslexia, but you develop it, but highly recommend dyslexia.com, and so that's how you find about Davis. You take 41 questions, you figure out if you are or you aren't, and I know I have a touch of it too, and so, anyway.
Thank you, appreciate your thought. Thank you very much for the share. Yeah, I appreciate it. That, by the way, goes in the face of some stuff too, because the whole notion of correcting it suggests that it's something that can be fixed, and so the notion is that.
I'm going to speak
Thought?
on that for a moment.
Leslie?
I'm very familiar with Ron Davis, and he has a book called The Gift of Dyslexia, which is very misleading. I'm not a proponent, and I'm going to get that out there, of the Davis correction method, because dyslexia is never corrected. It's lifelong, it's neurological. What we do know through MRIs is that with intense interventions, about 150 hours, there are portions of the brain that did not light up prior to intervention that will light up with the right intervention. So I don't want to poo-poo what this lovely lady has said, because perhaps for her son it was, but overarchingly, the Davis method is not sanctioned by the International Association for Dyslexia, or I'm just saying it isn't. So I don't want to mislead people, and I certainly don't want to get into any confrontation. I think it's wonderful that it was very helpful for your son, and I have heard that there are some people that have benefited through some of the methods of the Davis correction system. But the research shows us that the most effective system for dyslexia, if you're looking to remediate reading, writing, and spelling, is an Orton-Gillingham-based approach. And that's through research, and that's coming out of Yale University, Dr. Sally and Bernard Shaywitz. So I do want to get that out there too. I don't want to mislead people, but I feel very remiss if I don't mention that.
Thanks, Leslie. And the learning point there may be this notion of we find something if it works, let's, and we find something if it doesn't work, let's, and we find something that,
Yeah.
so the continued notion that you mentioned
Yeah.
about persistence and resources and so forth. Point, question, thought.
Our son is in 3rd grade, Unit 4, and Ms. Sullivan, I guess I'll talk more to you directly. He's in the 8th percentile for testing out of 2nd grade for his reading.
Sure,
He's 1 percentile for math.
sure.
The school district does not look at dyslexia as dyslexia. It's a specific learning disability.
Absolutely.
That's what they tell us.
Absolutely.
So we can't get him any specific help at this point. In the 3rd grade, we want to test him out for the next first 90 days, 60 days of school, and then determine whether or not where he's at with his 3rd grade class. He has, his strengths, class clown.
Sure.
His strength is verbal communication. He
That's a
can communicate with anybody on any level, on anything in his class. So on the playground, he's fantastic. When he is in the classroom, he is distracted. He is looking outside because what it's time to do is the work, and everyone else sits down to do it. He doesn't know where to start. He doesn't know what to do.
Sure.
And so we are very lost in terms of what we're doing with the district.
This is more, and I'm not doing any district in, and this could take us 35 minutes, and I'm gonna say at the end of this, you might wanna touch base with Leslie specifically. This is not atypical. I mean, and I'm not doing a district in. Quick comments about this from a teacher, special ed perspective, and you're connected
I'm
also.
just wondering, since Pat Quinn signed that bill in July, why, what was the purpose of signing it if it still doesn't help? I mean, obviously, there's a huge problem with dyslexia.
Yes, there is.
There's a
And-
House Bill
Why-
3700
Yeah.
that's been
Yeah.
passed through legislation, and
I
it's
don't
in its development
understand.
stage, kind of.
Because it's in the development stage. The bill has been passed, but there's still a lot of groundwork. And ironically, I'm so glad that you brought that up. I believe in October that we are going to actually have a speaker or speakers that are going to address more about HB 3700, 37 to 35, I can't remember, 3700. Let me just say this, it's going to be exciting for the state of Illinois eventually, but as with anything, these bills take a long time. There are approximately 18 to 20 states in our country now that those bills have passed. Legislation is already done. They have early intervention and diagnosticians in the school system. Texas has always led the way. Illinois is way behind the Powerball. However, we're getting there. And there are things that are going to happen. It's just, as with anything, the political process takes a lot of time. So for now, it's exciting, but for those of you that are sitting here living the life, it can't happen soon enough, and I get that. But do know we are in October sponsoring, and I believe Naomi Jacobson is actually going to either be speaking or she's going to get somebody to speak to discuss more about that and actually where it is in Springfield as we speak. So that being said, may I just ask one quick question? You two are together,
Yes.
correct? And your son, does he already have an IEP? I could not, no, he does not.
They
He's getting
helped him
tested.
last year, he had summer school.
Okay, but he does not have an individual education plan per
They
se.
won't do it for 60 days.
Okay, well,
So
it's not.
we're gonna get halfway through the year.
okay.
And he still isn't getting any help.
And that's a law, and I can talk more about that later unless anybody wants to hear about that. But they have 60 calendar days to actually do an evaluation. The fact that they're doing it is good news, and I can talk to you guys more about that later.
Let's go back here, and do you have a thought to this
I
can't say
have a
issue?
question for the team here.
Got it.
I had a
Let me-
question about this, this bill that was
Let's
passed.
stay right on this for just a minute, and then let me go to you, and then let me come right to you.
Are they actually funding that, or did they just pass a bill and said, well, we'll find the money sometime?
I don't know. I personally don't
That's what I
know.
understood,
Yeah.
is they
Yeah.
didn't really pass the funding for it.
And I think that you're right, Topper. I believe that you're right, and the reason that I believe that that is probably true, but please don't quote me, is the fact that they're saying right now to school systems, yeah, the bill's been passed, but really, nothing's changed right now. Nothing has changed. And in order for things to change, they're gonna have to put some money where their mouth is. And I think that you're probably right on that.
John, a follow-up thought to this?
Your son sounds very familiar. He's me. He's gonna be okay. And, you know, my folks, they were older when I was little and they didn't have any energy, and I went my merry way. And when I grew up, the town, you went out and you came home when it got dark. It's not like that anymore. So you're gonna have to be the people that find what he can succeed at. And when you do that, that's going to make all the difference to him. So in the meantime, before you get IEPs and whatever all those other things are that I don't know about, just find what he's good at, help him do those things that he can succeed at, and just look at the joy in his face, and he's going to be okay.
He's very visual.
Yeah.
He's very visual.
And that
Get him a
visual and
camera.
that verbal is gonna be
You
huge.
can take a manifold off a flathead V8.
There you go.
Put a 3-deuce carburetor on
There you go.
and do it in his sleep, and knows exactly what wrenches and what to do.
Good
He's learned
deal.
that from his grandfather.
But I do want to say one thing. I feel very compelled to say this. We are now living in 2014. The beauty of all this is we do know what works for children with dyslexia when it comes to the reading, writing, and spelling piece. So not all is lost. You know, back in the day, not that you're old.
Yeah.
I'm old,
Yes, I am.
But they really didn't know. So nowadays, there's still, while you're finding what your child is good at, and you should, everybody should feel good at something, for sure. The good news is, though, there are interventions out there that truly can be miraculous for children with dyslexia, to ensure that that reading, writing, and spelling piece does not have to be the struggle that it is currently. So there is that as well. Don't think all is lost, that they're never going to learn to read, spell, and write, because they really can with the proper interventions.
And
Absolutely.
that's a huge part of what school's about.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be.
Please.
And that's what I want to speak to exactly. So my son, who's going to be embarrassed I'm talking about it, but he's in 8th grade. And his story was exactly the same as the story that you all are telling. But we found a tutor, which we brought with us today, Michelle, who teaches in Orton Gillingham.
Sure.
And so he was, I think, 3 grade levels, 2.5 or 3 grade levels behind in reading when we started Orton Gillingham. And he's at grade level. Did you test him? Right at or above grade level. And it's like night and day. So the big thing was studying, and now that you know that it's dyslexia, read about it, and there are really, you're absolutely right, absolutely proven methods that completely work. And then there's a few accommodations that you need in the school system, and you have to go and tell them, don't wait for a darn IEP. You have to say, here's what we need. We need the books ahead of time. We need him to, you know, at times have tests read to him. Like, there's very specific things. And then once he gets comfortable with that, then and got caught up with the Orton Gillingham, then he didn't even need those accommodations anymore. So I just wanted to really say that I think that he would have been on the same path of, you know, he has brilliant gifts. But we didn't have to just focus on those. He actually got the reading up to
To where it needed to be. Sure. Sure. And
Can I
that's
ask
definitely
you,
Uh-oh, sorry.
and I don't mean to foot, but and you can say pass, what's the thing that's helped you the most over the last 4 years? And can I ask you to say 2 things that this lovely person has done that has helped you? What would be your top 2?
I can't remember. I can't really explain.
Does she believe in you?
Yeah.
She thinks you can do stuff?
Huh?
Does she think you can do
It's like,
stuff?
what?
So she believes in you? Does she challenge you and get on you once in a while? Yeah? And somehow that personal one-on-one helps? Straight?
But I would actually say though that watching the method, it's not just about that, it's actually a real method.
Yeah.
Where he learned he learned every single letter, every single sound from scratch. It's a completely different way to learn too.
Thank you. And we might do a 1-minute commercial on that, but not just yet. Morton Gillingham, Leslie, but not just yet.
Okay.
But
I mean,
let's do
yeah.
that. Because I want to get, yes, sir, you've been patient,
So
thanks.
I have a question for each of you, and I'd like you to think about this really hard. And if you don't have an answer, you don't have to give one, but.
Can you all hear?
So when you were, your very first memory of maybe there's something wrong, before you went to kindergarten, you now know what you know, you now have had this experience. Can you give any deep understanding about when you first realized that there might be something that you weren't doing well, or you couldn't process, or you didn't understand? Like a letter that didn't make any sense. If I asked you to start quoting equations in Greek letters, you probably wouldn't do very well at that, nor would they.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer to this is, but I'll bet you there's some early memory that you had where you knew things weren't perfect.
Sorta, but my memory is not that I'm broken. My memory is that everybody else had it wrong. It's almost like you can't tell somebody what it's like to live in Europe because they've never lived in Europe. I don't know what it's like to learn from a non-dyslexic person because I've always been dyslexic. So my earliest memory was somebody else telling me I was broken. I don't remember being broken.
But that's your recognizing that there was something wrong. And
That was
what
them
I asked you
recognizing.
That's not what I meant. I'm saying, do you remember that something wasn't being processed right? Some piece of information came in and you got it wrong. I'm not asking that somebody identified that you are not,
I was in a
them.
math class,
Yeah.
and I got an answer wrong, but it was right. The only issue was my 5 was backwards.
Okay, that's the kind of thing. Like you
Yeah.
can write a 2 instead of a 5 because it's upside down 5.
Yeah, 5s, 2s, S's, P's, Q's, M's, N's.
What if every time the letter A came along, it was crossed off, it had a big black mark across it? Would that be a problem?
No, yes, because my mind can't fill in the blanks.
Exactly.
It has to be there.
Anybody else?
Mine's the word church. I can remember, it was 3rd grade or so, and our spelling words were on display for our parents, and my word was church, and it was wrong, and the teacher was displeased with my display of the word, and she told me it was wrong and that I need to check it. And I went and checked it, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And she spelled it for me, and I put it next to the word that I'd spelled, which was C-R-U-C-H. And to this day, it's one of my worst
So
words.
H and R were
I can't distinguish them.
indistinguishable. So I want to hear 2 more answers, but it's amazing that something so simple can be so dysfunctional. Like if I say, how many fingers am I holding up? And you say 5. If I said, no, it's really 4, your life would be devastated, right? Because you can't perceive
Sounds like no.
Well, the
not
thing is
really.
with dyslexic, I don't know about a lot
Yeah,
of,
an R and an H.
we like to
It's
know
difficult.
why.
Let me go to John and Leslie with this, or to Alan and Leslie with this quickly, and appreciate the question, and then let me get some other questions while we're looking at a time crunch. Alan, the thought to when did it first hit you?
First of all, I thought I was normal, and it wasn't until the system told me I wasn't that I knew. And then I didn't understand why. So there was I was really good at, before I got into school, at competing in all the kinds of games that kids play. And it wasn't until the system told me. There was
So you
no
never had a
indication. I suppose the fact that I was primarily left-handed and they changed me to right had something to do, but that wasn't foreboding at that time. That was the way people did things. And a lot of learning disabled individuals are confused between left and right.
Oh my gosh, okay, sorry, I just got chills because that's
When I was in the
exactly-
Army, I had to double up my thumb on my right hand. So
No
when
can in your sandwich hand.
So when they said, turn right, I knew which way to turn.
For me, it's a mole on my right hand.
That's so funny that Alan's saying that, because prior to you saying that, I really was thinking long and hard. And for me, it's always been directionality. I mean, even to this day. But I can remember even in grade school, I moved a lot because my father was a career military man, so I didn't have the luxury of memorizing schools, and once you did, then you'd have to leave. And I was perpetually late. I couldn't a lot of times find the classroom because I would turn left thinking it was the other way. And directionality for me, even to this day, my husband's like, your other left, Leslie. Your other left. And I have to remember, even now, I have to remember, okay, I write with my right hand. And so directionality is a real issue for me.
Thanks. Question?
The students that I have worked with who have dyslexia, their realization that they had a problem when the teacher asked them to sound out a word because they cannot sound out. And the basic problem is short vowel sounds.
Comments? That I recognize that the people that I work with who are dyslexics, and you're a teacher, special education, have difficulty sounding out words. Comments, reactions, thoughts?
The way I was taught was to recognize the whole word rather than to sound it out. And that was a predicament because every time I came to school, that word didn't program that I'd seen it before. So it was a new experience every time.
Right, because it was more of a whole language approach. I can't see who I'm talking to back there, but I would say, you know, I hate to stereotype all dyslexics because I think a prevailing theme is, cliche-ish as this may sound, dyslexics are all very unique in their own way on certain things. I think overall, yes, sounding out words are very problematic for most dyslexics. I think that is true. And so when we talk about teaching children with other methods, such as the Orton-Gillingham method, it really does help these children learn how English works and then how to be able to do that sounding out of words.
It works better if they're taught how to make the sound just fall on the letters instead of blending.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different approaches in oral motor. I mean, I could talk for hours on that, but yes, overall, dyslexics truly do, for the most part, have a hard time sounding out not only known words, but especially unknown words, or what we call nonsense words. Very problematic, yes.
What's the best way without your 3-day training that I can
More than
find out
3
as a
days, but,
parent
yeah.
or an educator about Orton-Gillingham?
Google. We live in a society nowadays with, you know, beautiful resources.
So
you know,
spell it, Leslie.
Yeah,
How do you
it's O-R-T-O-N, Orton-Gillingham. And what you will find on Orton-Gillingham is it is a methodology, but it's also a program in and of itself. Does that make sense? In that Orton-Gillingham is a methodology of teaching children dyslexic children, how to read, write, and spell. But it's also a pure method that if you're certified, and I know this lady back here, you're a certified Orton-Gillingham. Yeah, as am I. It takes about 2 years to get your certification in that process. But the beauty of it is there's a lot of programs out there that now are based in the Orton-Gillingham method. And I can name a bunch of them, but I'm not here to sell or you know, coerce anybody into using a program. But there's lots of programs out there that are rooted in the Orton-Gillingham method.
Thank you. A thought from you about Orton-Gillingham and what you believe about it, and this has to be sort of quick too, if you don't mind.
So she's very sick.
Oh.
I'm going to interpret this for them. Watch how this works, see? These are accommodations. Advanced tutor.
Tumor.
Tutor.
Kids up here to about 7 days a week, I just can't say no.
Hit her up afterwards. You can hear her in a sentence right next to her. She tutors about 7 kids. She can't say no. 7 days a week. Yeah, 7 days a week. That's up smart. So hit her. Can you say?
I have her information.
You've got information, so we can connect. Please.
I have a girlfriend who I know she's dyslexic, but it affects her normal day speech, and it's almost like she speaks in riddles. Can you comment on that?
For me, you just slow down. You don't try to pull the words out of her because the words have to come to her. Like my Rolodex. Sometimes my Rolodex isn't in alphabetical order, but I'd still have to sing the ABC song to find it. So you just have to be very calm, very patient with her. Sometimes she'll probably look off to the side or up because she's trying to find the words. It's not the words aren't in her head, it's the process of getting from the head to the mouth isn't working. So be very patient.
Are you asking what can I do with her, or what thoughts could I give to her, or both?
Well, I was just wondering, first of all, if that's a fairly common problem, and also how I can be helpful to her.
Can you give an example? Because you said speaking in riddles, and I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Well,
Like-
she'll use kind of unusual vocabulary.
So she may say something to the effect that we need to go to the thingamajiggy, or she's saying we need to go to, and she can't come up with the word, or she's saying she might want to say we're going to the mall, and she might say we're going to the chicken coop. I mean, like that. No, I'm not trying. I'm really not trying to
It's
be
like
funny, but
she speaks in incomplete sentences. The words she uses make sense, but it's like she doesn't maybe get subject and verb together, or, it's
Yeah.
like half of a thought.
And she could also, too, I mean, dyslexia isn't always a standalone, I hate to say disorder, but learning disability or whatever you want to call it. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of other things that are going on with dyslexia. It could be apraxia. There could be a lot of different things going on. Cindy, I mean, as a speech and language therapist, is there anything you might?
There are a lot of individuals from childhood who have a great deal of trouble putting spoken language together. So conversation is a challenge. And if you can't get a word out of memory, you have to do things to try to compensate for that. So she might be going off on a tangent with a description. That's called a word finding problem, and there are children who have that pretty severely. This could be a lifelong problem with spoken language, and children who have problems with expressing themselves in spoken language are very high risk to have reading difficulties once it's time to learn to read. So they can go together.
Yeah, they can, or they might be.
They might be separate.
Yeah, they could be separate as well. So we would. No,
I have a little bit of a word search problem.
Yeah, I
but
definitely do.
I was just going to tell you, I did tell my wife I was coming to an autism conference tonight. She said, you don't have autism.
Yeah, you know.
Maybe I do. I don't know.
Please.
You talked about reading, writing, and spelling, but can you talk about math a little bit?
Sure. First off, I don't know how much you all know about dyslexia, and I would love to sit and talk for hours about it because it is my passion, actually. But dyslexia affects more than reading, writing, and spelling, and thank you for bringing that up. Math certainly is affected, depending on the child. I have worked with children with dyslexia that are exceedingly bright in math. However, ironically, they don't know their multiplication facts, can never seem to remember those. They will get numbers, even directionality when working problems sometimes. So there's a lot of things that are affected from dyslexia. Everything from directionality to learning to tie shoes, to telling time, to memorizing math facts. And it's funny, but a lot of the children that I work with They get the concepts beautifully, and they understand the concepts if they're read to them. But if a problem has a lot of steps, even multi-step math problems can be problematic as well. And especially one of the common themes with math is really memorization of math facts. Like rote math facts are real hard for them. And yet in the school system we do a lot of timing with math facts. And these are kids that if you gave them time, they could get it, but they cannot do it quickly. And even if you do give them time, they're never going to memorize their math facts, a lot of these kids, and or multiplication facts. We know that to be true.
Never?
Well, when I say never, I would be honest with you. To this day, I'm just going to use myself as an example. If you ask me what 8 times 7 is, I'm going to honestly say this. I have to go, I know 8 times 5 is 40, 6 more is 46, 6 more is, what is it, is 52? Seriously, I use a calculator all the time because I just can't seem to memorize my math facts. But we live in a world, why do we have to?
So those accommodations
really,
and those using resources and all those kind of things are going to be real critical.
And I ensure that one of those accommodations are, for my kids that struggle with that, always have the use of a calculator. There's no sense in my opinion, keeping that filing cabinet filled with things that they just are not going to get readily. So why not use a calculator?
Alan, thought, reaction?
General thought about learning disabilities and such things as math or reading. And that is one of the critical skills that a person with a disability needs is self-advocation. You have to be secure enough to tell people, I don't do this well, will you help me? And most people that are learning disabled are trying to hide rather than be out there. And when I learned to go to a counter to check out and tell the person, I've got enough money in the bank, but I can't spell the numbers to put on the check. Will you help me write my check? That's when I was secure enough to manage my disability. So at self-advocation, when you go to college, you got to advocate. You have to go to your professor and say, this is my problem. How can I do well in your course? And that's a critical skill.
There's a movie called The Big Picture, and it's Robert Redford's grandson who talks to the notion as a dyslexic about some very insightful sorts of things that we'd recommend. And I think maybe through the reading group, Jennifer, The Big Picture, and then Journey into Dyslexia is another film about this very issue that might be worth viewing at some point.
Yeah,
So,
we have both those documentaries, and if people are interested in viewing them, they can call the reading group.
and the reading group is located?
In Southwest Champaign, Duncan and Windsor, 3011A Village Office Place, and we have a website, readinggroup.org.
Phenomenal resource, phenomenal place, phenomenal people who work there and are incredibly helpful. Julie.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm wanting to talk to this woman who asked about her friend. I think some of the times the problem is not with the dyslexic, but it's with the listener, because I'm a person who wants the answer right now. And the more I am that way, the harder it is for my husband or anyone else who's dyslexic to come up with it. So if you can just take a breath and decide you have the time to wait, it's much easier. And sometimes I'll say, I need a better clue. And then it's not, you're not doing it right, it's give me the clue so I can help you, so I can figure it out for myself. So it's just a little, just be patient. It takes a lot of patience.
Beautiful insight. Thank you, Julie. Yes.
I'm a retired teacher, also a grandma. And I hope I can say this without crying because it makes me sad. But, and the parents over there, it's hard to get your kids the proper interventions and the accommodations. Yeah. We've been trying for years with Wyatt. And as a retired teacher, I know, as a classroom, I taught second grade, as a classroom teacher, it's getting harder and harder for kids. You see, oh, this child needs help. Well, they're not gonna get it because of all the rules and regulations about getting them extra help. And then when you do maybe get them some extra help, who knows the proper interventions and accommodations? Not everybody knows what they are. And so that's a sore point too. But when your grandson says, I suck at reading, Grandma, and I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, my Lexile number is supposed to be, and it's only, that breaks your heart.
He's going, he's in 7th grade now, and he's just now getting extra help. Like, I had to count on him to bring his homework home, which that didn't happen. Proper books and stuff. We went through having the teacher sign his assignment book and all that. But he just wasn't able to gather all that stuff and bring it home every night. And, it's really hard as a parent when you work all day long and then they come home in the evening and they don't have anything with them. It's just so frustrating. I feel sorry for these parents. I know exactly what you're going through, and it's really sad that my son's now in 7th grade, and I feel like he might be getting the help that he might need.
What's the one thing that you've done that you think has been the most helpful, and the one thing, if you could change it, you might change it? Is there a thought to that?
If maybe when he was younger, if I could have been more demanding, I guess, to get him more help, but he was always, Wyatt was always borderline. So it's like he fell right there, whatever scores they look at. Well, it wasn't bad enough for them to give him all the additional help he needed.
And he wasn't strong enough to get it.
Yes.
So that in between.
So he was just hanging around,
Right.
basically, not
Right.
even going
Right.
anywhere.
And as a grandparent, I would have said, hold him out of here, because he was a late talker.
Yeah.
Language delays. I have another grandson right now, at 3, is barely talking. He's going to speech and language and can probably catch up, but I hope my son and daughter-in-law hold him out a year so he has even longer to catch up. As a teacher, there were, I can picture them right now, parents who were a thorn in my side because they advocated, and I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have to talk to them again? But you know what, their kids are all successful, and those parents I grew to admire, so you have to advocate, never give up.
That's a powerful thought. Let's take these last 2 thoughts, and then I'm going to ask our panelists to share one last thought with you about working with parents and educators, what we hope will continue to be some takeaway stuff from this. So let's go here, and then to Sarah, and then last comment from our panel, please.
A few thoughts based on some of the things that were said tonight. There's a cost barrier also for some families. A lot of these private services, if you do advocate, are often costly. I learned recently, I don't know if it's still in existence, I actually learned through here that there's an agency in Danville that's received grant monies to provide
It's the Learning Center.
training.
Yeah.
But the kids can go for free. So for anyone who has a cost barrier, does it still exist?
I'm going to speak on that too, yeah.
It's online, I think it's called something of Danville Dyslexia Institute of Danville or something like that.
It's through the Masonic Learning Centers, and actually that's where I got my certification in Orton-Gillingham. It is free, you're absolutely right, and I tell my parents this all the time. There is a glitch though. It's only for those children that have a psychological, see, talk about word retrieval.
It's also a long day.
It's only for children that are psycho. It's only for children that have actually gone through and had a psychological evaluation through a psychologist. So whether they qualify for special ed or not, they have to have that report. The Masonic the Danville Learning Center will then look at that report, and they know exactly what they're looking for. There's certain subtests that they look for to see if indeed they suspect it's dyslexia. If it is, and 90% of the time it is, then they will accept these children and the children will go for free. But they will not do it without that report. They also will not do it if there's any suspicion of a mental impairment. So it is free. And a child will go 2 days a week for 2 45-minute sessions. It's a wonderful program. They usually have a large waiting list because it's free. But you do have to have that psychological evaluation done prior to them being able to accept your child into the program. But I tell parents about it all the time.
She said that Danville does not have a waiting list?
Yeah.
Not a long one right now.
Okay.
Danville does not have a long waiting
That's
list,
good.
so that would be, and you can hit them up, you can talk to, but you gotta get close to her, because she's having trouble connecting, okay?
What was the
Thank
name
you.
of resources to share, and I know for the reading, but sometimes there's a vision therapy issue. My son was diagnosed with dyslexia, but also we've discovered double vision until age 7, 5 feet out. You can tell if your child can cross his eyes and look at a pencil. If he's not able to cross his eyes, there are other issues involved with that some of these other therapies may or may not help. But it's it took 4 to 6 weeks to correct that for my son. It made a huge difference in his writing, a huge difference in his ability to read and focus on words. And that's something else to keep in mind. And I've read that it can be a symptom. Ocular motor dysfunction can be a symptom of dyslexia. And that's another important to be looking at that broader picture. And there's also something called reflex integration therapy, which seems to be more of a European philosophy, but it's basically the primitive reflexes as a baby may have been retained, the Marrow reflexes, other reflexes, and that's something else you can look online. And those are basic 5 to 10 to 15 minutes of exercises a day that do make a difference, also in vision and hand-eye coordination and other issues that you're able to then really maintain and use that. For instance, the Lindemann Bell or the Orton Gillingham methods, some of those foundational things then help being able to retain memory and things like that.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm just going to speak a little bit on that.
Well,
yeah, that's fine.
people give what we're getting, and we're about at a time issue, and Sarah.
I just wanted to bring up executive function. Leslie, do you have anything to say about that? I just feel like...
Well, when you talk executive function, you're talking about, obviously, the brain. In what way?
And how it applies to these kids that are suffering. And I think it's a big thing for me personally. My son is 8 and is dyslexic. And looking into executive functioning goals and his deficits there, with all, he's being tutored by, the proper methods, but the executive functioning part of it has been helpful for him, whether it's staying organized, just coaching in executive functioning has been helping us hand in hand with the tutoring.
So the executive functioning in working towards getting him more organized, would you say?
From the parents I've talked to, it's been across the board that all the kids have had, deficits in that area. And it's worth Googling, looking into,
I mean, there's a ton out there. I mean, I will say, proceed with caution. I've heard a lot of things tonight that I think a good start would probably be if you're looking and you're Googling, probably looking through the Dyslexia Association, through the state of Illinois. They research a lot. They don't sanction programs per se, except for Orton Gillingham. They certainly do. There's a lot out there, as this woman spoke about the correction therapy. There's the tracking therapies. There used to be what you're talking about. A lot of people used to do the crawl therapy, getting their kids to re-crawl. There's a lot of things out there. There's diets. I'm going to say this, a lot of it is not substantiated. However, if you as a parent have had success, I'm certainly not going to poo-poo that by any means, but just please proceed with caution. There's a lot of people out there that know people are desperate and they want answers, and there's a lot of people out there that will take advantage. I think it's really prudent to look and be very resourceful. That's why the internet is a wonderful thing, but you will find that there's a prevailing theme about what we are finding and what the research has shown really is effective for children with dyslexia. If you're talking strictly academics, I can't say it enough, there are those interventions that have proven to be effective. The tracking, there's a lot out there. I think you have to really weigh that as a parent and talk to professionals. Really talk to people that are in the field and have been researching this for many years. So just proceed with caution is all I'm going to say.
And it sounds like we've got I'm hearing proceed with caution, I'm hearing proceed with persistence, I'm hearing proceed with advocacy, I'm hearing proceed with love, I'm hearing proceed with belief that, I don't think we all do the we shall. But I think we do need, I think that hanging in there and loving our kids, as you heard from our panel, is an incredibly important piece of this whole puzzle and this whole dynamic. We need to be done. Takeaway thought, Tina, John, Leslie, Alan, takeaway thought.
Takeaway thought, your kids aren't broken. They just think differently than you and think differently from the mainstream classroom.
Thanks. John?
Well, don't give up. It's really hard when you feel that your child's different somehow. It feels like somebody's kicking you in the gut. And it's not easy on the children either. But if you, first of all, it seems to me I should have been sitting in those seats, not in this seat. I'm not an expert in this.
You are, you live it. You live it.
But if you, I know that growing up, as I started to think that, boy, I must be dumb because I just don't get it. And I can't find a way to figure out how to read. And that seems to be a really basic skill that most of my friends have. One of my best friends in life, John Frasca, is brilliant. And, you know, we were side by side through our school career till we got to college. And John was always in the smart class and I was always in the dumb class. But he never held it against me. And to watch somebody succeed when I couldn't, it didn't make me feel bad, but as time went on, I think I developed a real self-esteem problem. So if you can find those things that your children can be successful at, until they can overcome some of the challenges of dyslexia and learn those coping skills, if you can give them that bright spot where they can succeed and they can show you that they can do it, I think that would be tremendously important.
Thank you. Leslie?
And I just want to say dyslexia is more common than you think. It affects about 15 to 20% of the population. I think the fact that putting a name to something does kind of normalize it for children. There's so many people out there, famous people, non-famous people, that also have dyslexia. So let your children know they are not alone by any stretch of the imagination. And in any given classroom on any given day, there are 3 to 6 children sitting in that classroom that have the same struggles that your children do. And that's the truth. And I think that's why it can seem very overwhelming for the teachers that are teaching, because there are so many children that are struggling. But that being said, I do agree with what everybody here has said too. If at all possible, expose your children to as much as you possibly can and find something that, I'm not going to say that they excel at, we don't excel at everything, but something that they're good at and they feel good about themselves doing, because that's real important.
Thank you. Alan?
You're lucky to be in school at this time because there are more people who know more about how people learn with learning disabilities than there ever was before. I lectured teachers across the state of Illinois about learning disabilities in the 70s, and I had teachers come up and say, I don't believe there is such a thing as a learning disability. So we're a long ways along in this road, and there's bound to be a teacher somewhere for your child. It may not be the one that you're struggling with now, but you'll find one if you keep looking.
Thanks.